It's early January 2026, and we're speaking again with Kiran Morzaria, Chief Executive at AIM-listed Cadence Minerals, epic code KDNC. Cadence, of course, owns a 35% stake in the Amapa iron ore project in Brazil. Late last year, Cadence and its offtake partner completed and signed a $4.6 million prepayment agreement to restart the Azteca plant at Amapa. And with operations now ratcheting up ahead of first production, the company has this week secured the Preliminary Environmental License, or LP for short, which enables production of the full mine capacity of 5.5 million tonnes per annum of DR-grade iron ore. Kiran, it's good to see you again. How are you? And a Happy New Year.
Oh, Happy New Year to Alan. Yep, it's good to see you again, and it's great to start off the new year with some really great news from Brazil.
It's a cracking announcement, isn't it? I mean, Amapa, of course, has been years in the making, but all of a sudden, the last 3 to 4 months, we've seen a real acceleration in developments, financing, permits, and now, of course, the environmental license. Talk us through how significant is the grant of this license?
Well, the grant of the preliminary environmental license is a very significant milestone for Amapa. It confirms the environmental feasibility of the project critically at both its full intended scale, so it's the environmental permit, preliminary environmental permit for the full production of the mine, its plant, and the tailings storage facility, and the Azteca plant. It materially de-risks the redevelopment. And just as importantly, it allows us to move from high-level planning into detailed execution preparation, particularly around the staged restart around the Azteca plant. So it's really important. It's critical for the development, and it's we're going on, as we said, in terms of our plan to get this plant started as soon as possible.
Well, of course, you've ticked every box and delivered on or ahead of schedule, as you said you'd do last year. Can you just take us through the remaining installation license requirements and timelines?
Yep. So what we've got now is the preliminary environmental license. Now the next stage is the installation license, which is the permit that allows physical works to begin on site. The outstanding requirements were announced beforehand. They include the archaeological study and the water and effluent discharge licenses. The archaeological study we completed and we submitted in the middle of December, ahead of schedule. In parallel, the preliminary license allows us to advance the detailed engineering, refurbishment, planning, and long lead item preparation, so that once the installation license is granted, we can move straight into works. Now we expect, and we're not revising this as yet, but we expect the installation license to be granted, as we've said, at the end of March, and therefore another 3 months, April, May, June, will be into production. So we're keeping our forecast as we have previously said, even though things are advancing faster than we expected. But we might be conservative with this and carry on with our forecast of effectively installation license granted in March, and then construction from there of the Azteca plant and production in June.
Okay. Well, you said, of course, that Azteca is forecast to be cash flow positive from the first shipment, and I think based on the current iron ore price, we're looking at margins of around $40 per ton, based on current prices. Firstly, is this still the case? This has come a bit from left field, but of course, Trump's actions up the coast in Venezuela, I mean, are we looking at June first production, or possibly even earlier? I know you alluded to that just now.
Yeah, I still think we're going to keep those timelines the same. The impacts, as you've just said, the iron ore price has actually remained stable, relatively actually stable for a while now. That $40 margin still hold the case. We still believe that to be the case going forward. Azteca is a low capital stage restart, and at current iron ore pricing, it continues to support the strong margins. Look, while the geopolitical developments can create short-term volatility, the long-term demand for high-grade and DR-grade iron ore remains robust. It comes from Brazil, it will come from West Africa, it comes from Australia. So those are the main producers and the largest producers of iron ore. The US is not particularly, doesn't view it as a critical mineral, but it's really important for the development of infrastructure around the world. And we still see long-term demand, mainly in India, Indonesia, and China. But those are the areas that we see the greatest demand for iron ore. So it's not really critical to American infrastructure. In terms of timing, subject to permitting, as you've just said, we're now measured in months rather than years from first production. We got the refurbishment and commissioning scheduled to commence once installation license is in place. And as I've said, that's March and a 3-month commissioning time from then.
Excellent. Well, of course, the production revenues from Azteca will go towards fast-tracking the recommissioning of the larger Amapa mine and projects. So you've now got the LP, the environmental license, in place. Are the remaining installation licenses a mere formality?
Look, no license is ever a formality, but the pathway is clear and well understood. The preliminary license applies to the entire mine development envelope, including Azteca, and provides a regulatory foundation for the installation approval. In a normal greenfield site, this would be incredibly important. And it is still for us. It confirms what we've been talking about all the time, is that we've been saying, look, the only outstanding items are A, B, and C. That's exactly what it's confirmed. Those are on target. We're and ahead of target in some cases, and we're moving ahead. The remaining requirements are known, advancing as planned, and importantly, LP allows us to stay ahead by progressing engineering and procurement, so we're ready to execute as soon as the installation license is granted.
So the Azteca plant is up and running, producing DR-grade iron ore. The upgraded PFS is, of course, in place for Amapa. Can you take us through the final steps required to bring the Amapa mine itself back into production?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the PFS in place, we will then embark on the definitive feasibility study. And as we've discussed beforehand, the idea with that margin of sort of $40, that will allow us to commission and start the definitive feasibility study as we get the cash flow going through. That definitive feasibility study represents the portion of which then allows us to finance the larger project, whether through a combination of debt, project equity, royalty, offtake agreement. So, a vast swathe of possibilities to finance that, including JV partners. And in fact, the visit that we had just before Christmas was to show the state of Amapa, the various aspects and various areas of financing available in the United Kingdom, from large private equity houses to some of the larger debt providers in the world for mining projects. So that will be the progress. The progress will be get this going, utilize the free cash flow to fund the definitive feasibility, execute that, obviously get our installation licenses for the rail and port components, and finance JV, bring this into production after that.
Okay. Well, of course, on the subject of funding, there was the recently oversubscribed £2.5 million fundraise. That, of course, included 180,000 of investment from you and the Cadence board. So put that together with Cadence production revenues. Obviously, you're going to require a JV funding partner to redevelop the wider Amapa mine. What sort of funding requirements do you see may be required going forward from this point?
Well, the whole plan with the Azteca plant was, in essence, to remove the requirement for Cadence to put money into the project to fund the DFS and fund the ongoing development and the working capital of Amapa. And that's, it all being well, that's what we should do. Of course, the cash flow from the project is slower than raising capital, so the DFS will take a bit longer. But ultimately, it means that there's no dilution to our shareholders in relation to that project. In addition to that, of course, the larger project, i.e. the full Amapa project, does require, and of course does require additional funding. Now, as we just mentioned beforehand, that can be a multitude of things. The idea is to minimize shareholder dilution, both at the project level and at Cadence level, and utilize all of the things I just mentioned beforehand, such as JV partners funding it, offtake agreements funding it, royalty systems funding, basically forming the large chunk of the equity capital stack, and then debt funding effectively around 60% of the larger project. So we're talking about a 377 million project that delivers a 1.9 billion NPV, $322 million of free cash flow a year. So those are really attractive economics for debt and equity into the project. What's important with this Azteca plant is that it shows that we're able to operate. We will have the installation license for the full mine. The preliminary license is already granted. We will have the installation license for the port and the railway that completely derisks licensing for this project. And as we would have embarked on the DFS, and also in completed DFS, will largely de-risk the technical side. It shows that we can operate, we have the licenses, and we have a highly economic iron ore deposit producing a DR grade for the next 15 years. That's an incredibly attractive proposition to any type of funding, whether it be debt, royalty, equity, into the project. So yeah, those are the stages. Our focus at the moment is really getting Azteca up and running, showing that we can deliver to that, and reduce the risk along the way.
Thanks, Kiran. That's a really detailed explanation of it. So before we go, in the near term, are there any other developments that investors should look out for in the run up to Azteca starting production in a few months?
Yeah, really simple. Investors should watch out for the progress of the installation licenses. As I said, I'll keep informed, and any continued advancement of the Azteca engineering refurbishment. The critical timelines at the end of March, installation lights granted, and then into refurbishment, and then into production in June. But along the way, we'll keep investors, as we always do, informed about what's happening. I'm going to be going out to site on a regular basis. We'll provide video feeds from there so investors can see how we're progressing. So for us, each milestone we hit takes the risk out and brings us closer to production. That's what we've got to focus on.
Fantastic. Well, a red hot start to 2026 for Cadence and Amapa. Kiran, we wish you and the board every success in bringing Azteca online in a few months, and of course fast tracking the restart at Amapa. Kiran Morzaria, Chief Executive at Cadence Minerals, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Alan. It's always a pleasure.